Hello again. It was time to start getting some more milling done, so this is the scrap pieces that I started with for building my fourth drying pallet. And this is one of the existing ones. They're 8 feet long and 43 feet wide. So I need to finish this one and build another one. So we'll start bringing stuff over, and I figure the easiest, fastest way to do this is to use the one that I already have as a starting point and then just build the next one on top of it. That works out pretty slick. Pallets aren't exactly, a terribly complicated science. The only thing I would actually change, I think, is going forward. I need to give myself just a tiny bit more room so the in between the two middle sections, so that the forks can be as wide as they spread as wide as they will go on the tractor. Right now I have to have them in just a little bit, or I have to have the pallet off center. And when you get, a couple thousand pounds, off center is not a good thing, especially bouncing around on dirt roads. The nail gun is definitely a crucial thing to speed these up. The first few I built were with screws just because I didn't have the nail gun out, and they'll last forever, but they definitely took a long time to build. I think it took me like 40 minutes to completely build this, versus a couple hours for the others, for the first few. But what I'm doing right now is cutting some stickers, which will serve two purposes. One is to give as thin a standing point as possible on for the first layer of boards, and the second is that they'll provide a little boost to the structural integrity, since they're actually being attached to the 1x4s. And since the older version didn't have that yet, I cut enough that I could make sure I got those on that one, and then the third one as well. The first one currently has lumber actually on it drying, and that was one of the things I discovered that I wanted done when I built that, or when I put the lumber on that one, was I wanted something thinner than the 1x4 for actually mounting that on there. So we'll get that added to the third one. One of the other things that I'm going to do while I've got these all stacked up is add some eye bolts so I can put a strap over everything. And I'm working on a metal roof basically for each pallet that'll have a curve to it so that it'll shed water and keep the lumber under it dry. But that'll be footage for future videos as I get them done. I was planning on working on that, and then got sidetracked by a surprise project for Emily while she was on her family vacation cruise. So there's a few things that got delayed because of that, but that's okay. the idea here is that the boards, after they're milled, will go across the stickers, and they'll have a gap all the way around them, and then another sticker, and then another layer of boards, and another sticker, so on. And then these will allow me to use some of my older, cheaper, shall we say, weaker, less expensive ratchet straps that I no longer trust using for... I mean, I guess they work. I've kind of become a ratchet snap snob, I guess. I like them to function and to open easily without fighting them. And so all these older ones that don't open easily, I don't care if they get left out in the rain holding down tarps or lumber. So that'll be a good purpose for them. One of these actually, on the back here, apparently the therefor block on that bottom board was stronger than the bolt. I don't know if the bolt was just... I mean, I guess it had to have been flawed or something. I don't know. But I actually sheared the eye bolt, so I'm going to have to drill a new hole and put a new eye bolt in there. I was pretty surprised about that. Alright, and there we go, last one. Charlie thoroughly enjoyed the fact that I was able to actually play while I was working, since I wasn't using, a saw at this point or anything like that. So alright, so now we've got them over here by the mill. I gotta get something to put down on the ground so I can keep these dry-ish. And now I can go begin milling. See, I just adjusted that, the forks, so that I could actually pick that one up in the center instead of having it off center. So I just had to bring each fork in just a tiny bit, so we'll fix that for the next load. Alright, so these are a couple of cottonwood logs. They are each about 8.5 to 9 feet in length and around 14 inches in diameter, if I remember correctly. I think this one was actually 16, and the second one, the closer to the camera, was 14. And I love having the extra track length. I love being able to do 2 logs at once like this. It definitely saves a lot of time. When I get the mill into its permanent spot eventually, that will actually be something that is I will probably add another extension or 2, to be honest, so I can do the same thing with 3 or 4 logs. You get them all trimmed down, and then you turn them all at once, and then you get your cants built. And like once the square cants are actually ready to go, it just saves so much time. What I'm doing with the offcuts is throwing them down in the muddiest spots, so they'll ultimately help build the ground up and firm that up. Eventually this will be kind of basically a parking area. There might even be a small carport shed type structure here. Who knows, we'll see. But it definitely gets challenging having the mud there. So having something to drive over and firm that up is a bonus. And as I mentioned in I think the last video or a couple videos ago, there's definitely a pile that I need to work through. So we shall see how that goes. But at this point, this process goes super fast because I've got them cut down to 8-inch wide cans, and so now I can just go in 1-inch cuts all the way down to the bottom. And if you noticed, there was another smaller cant that was left from the last 2 logs. So what I'll do is I don't like going all the way down, so I leave I go down to about 3 inches, and then I will leave that last slab, 3-inch by 8-inch whatever block there, and then I'll flip it on its side and cut that as I cut the 1-inch pieces for the next logs. That way I get the battens and things out of that. That works out pretty slick. And once I get the cant also, then I'll start laying all of the first offcuts on their side like this, so that as I trim them down, I get 1 and 2-inch pieces. And I'm sorting through and figuring out which ones need to be flipped over or removed now that they have two flat edges. So now I'll flip a bunch of them over so the flat edge is on the bottom and the rough edge is on the top, or live edge, I guess. So do the same thing, keep cutting those until they're thick enough. And it works out really well when you're specifically focusing on 1x material to get as much as you can out of each log. It does take a little extra time though, but I figure it's worth it, because everything I can get out of a log is something I'm not buying, and therefore is time not only spent enjoying milling, but time spent not working for somebody else so that I can go buy something from someone else. Alright, so this is about where I was telling you, so there might be one more cut there. It's hard to tell whether that's like 3 or 4 inches. Oh, yep, we're done. Okay, so see, I pulled the 3-inch by 3-inch basically beam or post or whatever that was left on the side. And so here you can see the last leftover 3x8 that's up on its side on the right side of that log. And sorry for the raindrop. It's actually small enough that I didn't even notice it when I put the camera back in the housing. Fortunately, it goes away after not too long, but since these logs are bigger, I ended up deciding to pull those 3x8s off, and I'll put them back on and mill them down. But this particular cottonwood is 12 feet long and 26 inches at the butt, 24 inches at the top. It was definitely a beast of a log. It actually weighed enough that I could barely pick it up with the tractor, so it's somewhere in the 2,000 pound range. Or just shy of 2,000 anyway, somewhere. But it worked out to be a pretty good log for getting a bunch of siding. I'm pretty sure between this log and the last two, I should have enough to completely finish siding in the last two sides of the spare room trailer. And you can see I'm starting to have to push the mill a little bit. That's how you know that you're getting to the point where you've got to change your blade again. This particular point is something that I find odd about a lot of... I've watched a lot of videos on people milling, and you notice that I only rotate it 90 degrees. That way I'm only doing 1/4 turn, and then I can square that end or that side. Then I'll rotate it again and cut parallel to the first cut, and then rotate it a third time, and now I can actually do my final cuts to width. I find it odd that a lot of people who mill will cut and then they'll roll it 180 degrees, and then they'll cut parallel to the first cut, and then they'll roll it 90 degrees. So now they're cutting their third cut is what my second cut would be, and then they have to roll it 180 degrees again. So I don't know, it's just a lot of extra work to me. I figure it's easy enough to square it, as long as your log stops are square, I guess, then it's pretty easy. So at this point I went and got some water for lubrication and have a fresh new blade. And you can see how much faster that's going. It always surprises me for some reason, the amount of difference there is from a slightly dull blade to a freshly sharpened blade. That first cut just every time blows me away. Alright, so what I'm doing here is I had a friend that had wanted to buy some slabs that were 2 inches by 8 inches, and I had the thought that I would take a piece off, and I wasn't actually going off of measurements. I was just going off of how thick can this be to get as much as possible, or get as thick a cut as possible. And I should have just measured the distance between the blade and the bottom of the back of the mill housing, because then I would have known that that's only like 6 3/4 of an inch instead of 8 inches like he wanted. So I ended up cutting that slab, and now I'm realizing that my mistake. But that's okay. So this green line is indicating the bottom of the pallet. And if you've never used hydraulics, then this is a good indicator of why you never store anything under lifted hydraulics, and you never go under or work under hydraulics unless they are mechanically locked, because you can watch and see this line. You can see that the the front end loader is just gradually getting lower. Now, in the case of putting boards on it, that actually works pretty well, because as I build the boards up, it kind of makes it so that I'm just putting them all on at the same height every time. So that kind of worked well, but I thought this was a good opportunity to demonstrate or show that difference. And these gray sleeves that I'm putting on there help immensely when rolling larger logs. And all they are is 2-inch PVC that I just cut down to about 3 feet or so. That was a suggestion that I got from some friends that I met while milling, and it was a phenomenal suggestion. It's time to put another blade on. So apparently I lied a few minutes ago, because obviously the new blade is going on now. And it only takes a few minutes. I'll have to get a picture. The first time I realized that I needed to change the blade, I wasn't paying that much attention, and I don't know, I just didn't realize how hard I was pushing the mill. And I got the boards off the mill, and they're super wavy. Like there's a difference of almost probably an inch, maybe even a little bit more than an inch between the high and the low on these waves. So I learned that I have to pay very close attention to that. So this little log that I'm working on now is the offcut from one of the therefor logs that I had used previously to make the purlins, I believe. It was either the rafters or the purlins. And to try and get as much as I could out of it, I cut this little section off the main log after figuring out how much I needed. So I took a 12-foot section off the end of the log, and there's just about 4 feet here on this section. So that was a pretty good 16-foot log. And what I want out of this is some 2x6 material that I'll use for the curved structure of the roofing panels that I was telling you about earlier. And so I'll take now that it's got the cut on it, what I'll do is cut twice for the cottonwood. So I have my 1-inch cuts there, and then I'll come back through and do a second, or cut here, so I get a 2-inch piece out of that. And that works pretty well. And clearly my kitty is trying to tell me to go outside. It's no good trying to tell her to be quiet. It doesn't work. So if you look back at the green line, you can now see that the the pallet has actually lowered by the full width of the pallet, so it's lowered about 6 inches. Doing the this was actually a unintended discovery. One of the challenges that the cottonwood faces is the fibers like to tear if the blade is not sharp. So once, and this is the problem that I ran into where it started to get super wavy, is that once it got dull, it started to tear some of the fibers. Those fibers would basically drape themselves around the tooth and then cause more tearing, and so I'd end up with these kind of almost a ball of cottonwood fibers around the teeth. Well, apparently the Doug fir was actually hard enough that when I would cut through the cottonwood, if there were any fibers there, I would cut through the Doug fir and it would actually force those fibers to get cut or broke or something. So that was rather surprising. Alright, so you can see here I've got two full 2x8s that I've got now, and I'm going to put this 6 3/4 thick log on here. We ended up actually changing our arrangement. It was originally that he had helped fix our ATV for us, because I just don't have somewhere to work on that kind. I don't feel comfortable tearing an engine apart when I don't have a shop. So we had actually taken it down in December and dropped it off with him, and he worked on it for us. And we had a mutually beneficial deal where I was going to give him a bunch of slabs, 2x8 slabs that he could use for whatever woodworking projects he wanted, and then we got the repair. Things changed a little bit. I found out he was actually trying to sell some of his power tools, and so I offered to instead just pay him cash to hopefully help, because I know if I were in a tight spot and I needed to sell my planer, table saw, whatever, that would definitely not be a good day. So I ended up just paying him for those repairs instead, which helps him out. And then so these 3 boards I was going to give to him will actually just get thrown back on the mill now, and I'll just make battens and trim pieces out of them. So no loss there. But here I'm just doing the same thing like I mentioned before. You got to just figure out which boards go where and keep cutting down until you get some that you can pull off, because I try and keep them as wide as I can. And I actually haven't counted how many boards I got out of these 3 logs yet, but there's quite a few. I got a picture that I'll throw up here of all of the lumber. Wow, I'm having a hard time talking today. I apologize for that. Now, had I been smart, I would have already taken those that lumber that I set off to the side, the 3x8s, and I'd have put them back on the mill now. But I forgot about them. I actually had gotten everything and was driving back away from the mill and realized I forgot about them, so I had to bring everything back. But anyway, here's a little bit better picture of the 2 logs there. This is where I started with after the first 2 logs, and then here this is where I ended up with after doing the 12-foot log. So like I said, there's quite a bit there. So that'll be it for today. As always, thank you for watching. Stay safe and healthy out there, and God bless you and yours.